This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and broadcast on DBTV. Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories.
Episode 715, my friends. So exciting for everybody to tune in. And another great story today, great episode today. We're going to be talking about We Tried That Once. Larry Mietus, also known as the Leadership Larry, he wrote this book. And certainly I've been in many, many companies where they had tried everything. We've tried that once, didn't work, blah, blah, blah. The excuses were just all over the place. Now, before we get to Larry, I want to remind you really quickly, we are live on Amazon. Everything is streaming just fine over there. Everything around me that you see, the fake plan, the sound panel, the bookshelf, the other sound panel, everything you can see around me, you can also purchase in the carousel. If you're watching anywhere else other than Amazon, you can also search for Christoph Trapp on Amazon. That'll send you to my storefront. All the products I've reviewed or looked at or talked about are on there. But now let's get to Leadership Larry and find out, what is it with all these excuses in corporate America? Who has the time for that and not moving things forward? Larry, welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Christoph. Thank you so much for having me.
Nice to see you. And I'm still have to think about what to put in front of my name, Christoph. Champion Christoph, maybe not Contenteer Christoph. I don't know. We will think about that later. Now, I want to remind people, I'm going to throw it up at the bottom here. Speaking of strategies, your website, people can connect with you there to hire you to speak and that kind of thing. But let's talk about what is with all the excuses. I mean, is it getting any better out there, or is it still like excuses central?
Honestly, I think it's getting worse. And,
oh my goodness.
I think we went through a period of time, especially with the pandemic, and total respect for what happened, the lives that were lost, the tragedy that the world went through. But there are still, 4 years later, people blaming certain things in their business on COVID. And we're beyond that. I think, Christoph, what I've noticed in my 20 years of business consulting is that it's really convenient for people, myself included, guilty as charged, and business owners and companies and corporations to make excuses that are just convenient. And it sort of becomes an ingrained part of the language system of those companies, of their corporate cultures, because you hear a lot of very common excuses all over the world, especially in the world of business. And then that's why I wrote the book. The book has 13 chapters, 13 different excuses that I debunk. But people are always saying things without even thinking about it, just off the cuff. We tried that once. No one's going to want this. No one seems to care. No one does it like I do. Oh, my accountant handles all of those numbers. Culture doesn't mean anything. And they say it and they're on to the next thought. And I've become the guy in 20 years who goes into companies and I say, look, let's look at where you've been. Look at where you are, which is usually where we hear the excuses. And then figure out where you want to go and how do we get there? What people do we need? What resources do we need? What capital do we need, et cetera? And what's doable and actionable and viable versus what's pie in the sky. And people sometimes just can't slow themselves down enough to have that thought process. And even at a personal level, we're not too far into the new year. People made resolutions. By this time, halfway through January, 90% of the world bailed on those resolutions. And someone might say, I want to be in better shape. Go back to them and say, what's happening? They go, well, that's out the window because I don't have time to exercise. Well, how much television do you watch every night? Oh, 4 or 5 hours. There's 4 or 5 hours right there. How about if you put your treadmill in front of your TV and exercise while you were watching and got 2 things done at once? A convenient excuse. So, unfortunately, to answer your question, I don't think it's better. I think it might be getting worse.
Oh my goodness. Certainly excuses are getting worse. We see that all the time out there. Oh my God, we can't do this. We can't do this, whatever. And it's interesting to me. I try a lot of different things once and I see if they work. And then sometimes they don't. I move on. I circle back. And the one example that came to my mind, which is very, very macro, so to speak, back in the day when Grammarly came out, I thought Grammarly was horrible. Didn't really do the trick. Didn't really work. And this is, I don't know how long ago. 12 years, maybe
Mhm.
longer. Whenever they were founded, I like saw them right away. I wanted to try them, and I thought they were horrible. And now, today, I couldn't live without Grammarly. Now, Grammarly is not always correct, but I couldn't live without it, right? Like it's a very nice autopilot. But I went back at some point and I thought, maybe I should test it again and see if I like it and see if it works today. So certainly, just because we tried something 10 years ago when things were so different doesn't mean they won't work today. It's completely bananas, and people just need to stop and move forward. Now, that's a common one. What's another common excuse that we hear, and how do we go against it?
Well, I hear a lot of business people and business owners say things like, well, if it's not broken, why fix it? And anyone in business understands that there's a life cycle to a business. There's differences between a business that's in its infancy, that's growing, that finally becomes mature. And at that maturation point, sort of the height of the curve, you have a choice to make. You either keep pushing the envelope, keep discovering, keep trying, keep probing, or you start to ride on autopilot, which is really the beginning of probably the demise of the business. So I meet a lot of people who say, oh yeah, it's all going great. It's been going great for 20 years. Why would we mess with anything? And honestly, the answer is because someone right around the corner, around the block, halfway around the world is already messing with it and you don't know it. And, when you think about the principles of Lean and Six Sigma and Kaizen, it's not about giant quantum leap steps. It's about tiny 1 degree, 2 degree levels of improvement. And all of those degrees add up over time to great strides. So I think as business people, we can either choose to be complacent. I mean, I'm totally on board. I love success. I use the phrase wild success for my clients, that we want to create that. But success also breeds complacency. So one of those excuses that I hear quite a bit is, well, let's leave it alone because we don't want to mess with it. It seems to be going fine. I mean, look at Southwest Airlines, great example. Probably the only profitable airline, maybe in the world, at least in the US, for about 3 decades. All of a sudden, they're moving pieces around because it needs to get better, incrementally better.
I think you kind of couched it there a little bit at the end, so maybe I know what you're going to answer, but I'm going to say, how do you even know that it's not broken? Like, how do I know something isn't broken? I produced a podcast over and over and over and over, and we sell some things here and here, and we're enjoying it. My guests are enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. Everybody's enjoying it as far as I can tell. But how do I know there isn't something broken? Or how do I know that it's as good as it can be? I mean,
great question. Great question.
Relevant?
And it's not really, it's, I don't want to be negative. People that know me know I'm an extremely positive person. It's not always about being broken and has to be fixed. It's about those incremental steps. I always say, how does a poor company, poor performing, maybe poor financially, become good? How does a good company become great? I mean, years ago, Jim Collins wrote the book Good to Great, paralleled sister companies across maybe 7 or 8 different industries, banks, retail, and said, how can one be thriving and their competitor in the exact same industry is filing for bankruptcy? And they do the same thing. But honestly, to answer your question, Christoph, I think a great question, because we're lost. We're in the forest every day with our people in our business. Step outside the forest, ask your customers. In your case, maybe ask your guests, is there something I could be doing? Is there something we could be doing that we're not currently doing that you would enjoy, you would appreciate, you would like to see us offer? And, let's face it, in business, a lot of great ideas come from the consumers. Southwest Airlines, go back there again. They did not invent the idea of getting to the airport early and standing in an A, B, or C line to pick a seat in open seating. They went to the airport and said to people, what would you do? What would you do at the airport to get the seat of your choice? And they said, no, show up 2 hours early, stand in line, blah, blah, blah. That didn't come out of their boardroom. It came out of the airport, came out of the consumers. And when you look at a lot of product upgrades, especially, it's just asking people, what features missing? What value add could we throw in there? What would be beneficial to you that we're not currently providing? And that's really how I think you make these baby steps of improvement.
Now, that is really something the consumer said. They want to show up 2 hours early at the airport to pick their seat. Like, that is not how I would like to fly. I prefer to go to the lounge and, sit there, pick my seat there, and then, pay for my seat. But maybe for that, it's a different target audience, right? Like
Well, that was then, this is now. Now, which is really maybe only 60, 90 days ago, Southwest is going to move away from that seating model after 30 plus years. Because again, they surveyed the public and almost 90% of the flyers said, if I'm not currently flying your airline, Southwest, I would if you didn't have this silly seating model. If I could pick in advance and know where I'm going to sit. So probably maybe halfway through this year, they're going to move in that direction. But how did they know to move? They went back and they asked the consumer.
Yeah, you have to ask, and you have to also listen to the consumer to find out what's going on, and what they want, and and even project kind of a little bit what their problems are going to be and how to solve them. I mean, I'll just give you an example. I grew up in journalism, and like what we're doing today, which is, I know there's things like we're working through them, and I forgot this and that thing or whatever. But back in my TV days, I mean, this would have been like a 5-person production. Do you know what I mean? And today, I mean, the problem that Restream, for example, solved, and all these different tools solved, is how do I do a live stream like as easy as I can? How do I produce it, right? I make you bigger, I make myself bigger, all these different things just here with the click of a mouse, super easy. So people have to figure out what the problem is that the consumer is actually trying to solve. Now let's talk about incremental change. Now I'm once again trying to lose some weight, and it goes down a pound at a time here and there, and sometimes half a pound. It feels like, oh my God, it's going so slow. Am I making progress? But then when you look at the month or 3 months, you see the progress. In a business sense, how do you know that you're making incremental progress and it's actually the right progress?
Well, as business people, and I work with an entity at the University at Buffalo called the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, and I've been a volunteer mentor there for 19 years. And probably the most common thread that runs through the thousands of people that have gone through the program is they don't understand financials. They don't understand the story that's being told to them by their financials. They don't track data, and they don't make decisions based on data. And at the end of the day, if you're collecting the data, it's right there in front of you. So we have to look for these, is incremental change moving the needle? And quite honestly, in defense of everyone, you, me, and everyone listening or viewing today, I think part of our impatience has been driven, especially the last decade, by technology, by social media. We've become very impatient people. We want to make a change, see a result, make a change, see a result. Call someone, get an answer on the first ring, not stand in line in a retail outlet or a restaurant. We've become extremely impatient people. And quite honestly, when we're making these incremental changes inside of our businesses, we need to be patient. We need to be realistic. We can't wait forever. I always say to my clients, we're going to measure this for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or whatever is reasonable based on the challenge. And then we're going to analyze and make a decision. Go back to what we were doing or move in a different direction. And the beauty of that is we all know how to go back to what we're already doing. It's the bird who knows how to get back to mom's nest. But if you never jump out and fly, you're never going to figure it out. So, we look at things like, I use myself as a perfect example. For the first time in my life, I bought radio advertising during the holidays to promote my book on Spotify. Well, now I can look at how many people went to my website, how many books were purchased, in what time frame, and did I break even, lose money, or is there a return on my investment? That's just simple data to decide would I ever do this again. So you've really got to be measuring. I mean, you're stepping on a scale to measure that pound, half a pound, pound and a half weight loss. You're using the tool. All right. Now, it would be realistic for you to say, well, I'm going to wake up tomorrow 10 pounds lighter. That's not reality. But we've become such an impatient society that we want those type of instant results.
I just want to point out, I was just sitting over here when you said I bought some radio advertising. I said, oh, interesting. I want to hear about that. And then you immediately said on Spotify, which of course Spotify can target a little bit better too than traditional radio. So my question on that is, I mean, did it work? Did the Spotify ad work? And did it run like ahead of podcasts or between music, or when does it run?
You know what? And then I always tell my clients, we do our homework, we get multiple bids. So I just didn't dive into the deep end of the pool. I called some companies that I heard advertising on Spotify, and I said, look, I don't compete with you. We're not even in the same market. Tell me what your results have been. And they couldn't stop raving. I got to tell you, for the amount of money I spent, which was minimal, my ad was placed almost 33,000 times in a 14-week period or leading up to Christmas. I'm still waiting on some trailing book sales numbers from my publisher, but I couldn't believe. I mean, I'd have to remortgage my house in traditional media advertising to get 33,000 commercials run. And my whole thing as a consultant, I tell people now, look, all we can create, any of us, is top of mind awareness. I can't create someone's desire and need for my services. You can't create someone's desire or need for your services. But when they decide they need that service, our job is to make sure we pop to the top of their brain first. Top of mind awareness. People are too smart, too sophisticated. There's too much data everywhere. You want to know something, ask a 7-year-old to Google it for you, maybe a 5-year-old, and they're going to figure out what you could figure out, or maybe what you couldn't figure out. So yeah, long story short, do I think it worked? I think it worked. Would I do it again? I think I'm going to do it again. But there was also that part of my brain that said, maybe I shouldn't do this.
Yeah. Fantastic. Congratulations on the success. That's great to hear. Now, I use Perplexity AI now to get all my questions answered. And it kind of took the whole thing out of, when you're sitting around and you're like, and people debate things. Oh, no, this is it. This is the truth, blah, blah, blah. You just Perplexity AI it and ask the same question and it'll give you the sources. So kind of interesting to at least try to get that nonsense out of our lives where people just make up stuff. Now, let's shift back a little bit to the topic of excuses. Why do you think people make excuses? Is it just ingrained? Is it like, are they just lazy? They're comfortable enough. They want to get to retirement, or like, what's the deal?
I think because it's become ingrained in our culture, and we're not pushing ourselves as people. It's funny when I work with most of the CEOs and company owners that I've dealt with for 20 years, I say to them, like, what's your number one desire? And they all say the same thing. I want my people to think like me. I want them to think like an owner. And I look at them and I say, well, when was the last time you taught them how to do that? And the answer is always, well, I don't have time to do that. So somehow magically, by osmosis, that 5th grade science word, the people that work in a company are supposed to have the same thought process, the same cares, the same passion, the same concerns as the owner of the company, just because they're in the same physical space some of the time. Not going to happen. And we'll care more when we're attached more, when we control the outcome. When I work with companies to build incentive programs, which is different than a bonus, an incentive and a bonus are not the same thing. And I say, look, the folks creating it have to have the say in creating it. They have to have control over the activity. They have to have access to the data. There has to be regular feedback and tweaks along the way, or they're not going to buy in. And typically when an incentive program works well, it's wildly successful and everyone's engaged. Everyone does better, but everybody knows how they contributed and how it happened. We've got too many people inside business today in America going, that's not my problem. I'm doing what's in my job description. That particular situation is Christoph's problem. So he can figure it out. Versus how do we all solve this together to make a better business that we can all benefit from? At the end of the day, in our North American culture, we don't do anything more than go to work. We don't sleep more. We don't eat more. We don't recreate more. We spend most of our lives at work. So I want people to be extremely successful where they work and extremely happy because we're putting in a lot of time.
Yeah, we got to find that balance. But, when you were just talking about how to collaborate and whatnot, one of my most interesting examples, I said to a person one time, I said, we should really try this and this and this. And their response was, that's not a priority. That's not one of my priorities. I'm like, oof, like all about slapping me across the face. But, it does certainly happen. And I actually thought that was their job to do. And but that doesn't mean that we couldn't talk about it, work on it together. But just like the people putting up their walls and their fiefdoms, building their fiefdoms, it's just it doesn't really get us anywhere. How about for business owners? How important is it or how do they even do it, to create that culture where people want to try things? And I mean, I wouldn't want to try things if I'm going to get in trouble every time I try something that doesn't work.
Well, as soon as you said, you shared your story, my mind automatically went, what happens to everyone who was in your situation? You never ask again. You never suggest again. You just go back and do your job, the job that's in your job description, because your mind says, well, why would I waste my time? Larry doesn't want to listen to me. So how do we create that culture? And culture is the key word. And even though the name of my business is speaking of strategy, I'm here to tell you culture beats strategy every single day of the week. Give me an A culture and a C strategy, and we'll put a winner on the field. Give me an A strategy and a C culture, and we might win, but I'm probably not going to bet on that. I'm not going to take that bet. So it really comes down to the culture, the heartbeat. It's not what we make. It's not what we do. It's who we are, how we treat each other, how we treat our customers. And quite honestly, I laugh, no offense to anyone listening. People call me all the time and say, hey, Larry, can I take you to lunch? And, about an hour, we'll hammer out this culture thing. But people need to understand, it's been documented, it's been proven. True cultural change in an organization takes 24 to 36 months of nonstop effort being applied. Why? Because when I walk in and say, hey, this is the way things are going to be, and I say that on Monday, and by Wednesday, I haven't said it again, and by Friday, no one's ever heard it again, people look and go, oh, that was Larry's flavor of the month. That was his Monday thought. He read a book over the weekend. So that's not going to happen, clearly, because all these things that he mentioned in the past have never happened. So it's just going to fall on deaf ears. So creating that culture, it's a lot of work. It's a big lift. And quite honestly, if you're the CEO, the owner of the organization, I always say to those folks, their focus should be on communication, culture, and people. Let everyone else around you that you hired in leadership, in management, that you trust to do their jobs, stay out of their way, move the barriers that are hindering their success. It's a big lift.
Maybe let's talk about this for about 90 seconds. I mean, how we talk about culture, but also what we've created, and especially the US, is this whole culture of people just moving from job to job, right? Pensions have gone out the door, and, people leave when they get a little bit higher paying job or whatever. So how do you create, and then there's some jobs, like CMOs, I think they're a little bit longer lived now, but they used to be really short at some point. How do you even build a culture if nobody sticks around for 36 months?
Well, again, we dug ourselves a deep, deep hole, and we need to dig ourselves out. And by that, I mean, a lot of companies I deal with don't have an organizational chart. You need to have one, because when people walk in on day one, they want to get an idea for what their career path might be. It doesn't mean it will, but they want to see that there's the potential for growth. When you look at the two youngest generations in our workforce now, Gen Zs and millennials, they've come right out and said, I need access, immediate access to competent leaders who can teach me something. When I send someone's a millennial or a Gen Z, and of course can't ask them their age, but if I'm in an interview with them on behalf of one of my clients, I'll say to them, how do you know when you're having a bad day at work? And they look at me and say, Larry, it's the days I don't learn anything. It can be 1 ounce of information, but I need to keep learning. I'm hungry. These two generations, they can recognize the smoke and mirror leaders. They don't want to work in those organizations. They would rather, they've self-reported nationally, they'd rather work for less money in a company with a better culture that has a better social conscience. All of that takes daily work from ownership. It's not a mission statement framed and hanging in the hallway that the UPS driver reads. It's not a vision statement framed. Take those off the wall and go up to someone in the place and say, in your own words, what's our mission? Most people don't know. Most people don't care.
Yeah, it certainly takes work. It takes the right people. It takes the right leadership. Larry, nice to see you. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and we're out.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite podcast platform, and subscribe so you don't miss the next